When we say reclaiming traumatic spaces, that could be relational spaces. That could be physical places like Paul is experiencing right now with being in such a prominent community town that is headquarters to the denomination that was so impactful in Paul's life.
I started getting a little bit sick to my stomach. I haven't been back here in decades. And on that drive, I almost can't even enunciate, and I have DID. I think some of my parts were just like, oh my God, what are we doing? Why are we back here?
Hey, it's me.
She's a former mayor. They're a former evangelical pastor with dissociative identity disorder. These two like to talk about the topics you're not supposed to talk about. They might cause you to perspire just a bit, but they'll definitely make you inspired. Let's talk religion and politics, and what spirituality and emotional well-being look like in a post-evangelical world. This is Paul and Ashley on Evangelical-ish.
Here we are.
Hey, Paul, tonight you are in
Springfield, Mo. I'm actually in a little town called Ozark, Mo, just outside of Springfield. We drove here from Memphis today. By the way, we're going to talk about the Obamas and what their speeches last night represented to us spiritually in the political realm. Rather than just bitching about politics, we want to see what is happening here, and we'll tell you what's been inspiring us. Yeah, we drove from Memphis, and I want to tell people from Memphis, like, I'm so sorry. It's not really an apology for me, but I had so many people tell me like, oh, Memphis is terrible. And I didn't find Memphis to be that way in the slightest.
Not once. I can relate to this so very much because as a person who's lived and worked in Fresno, California since 1987, active in local government, economic development, and like, I can't tell you for the longest time, people were like that about Fresno. And even to this day, people living in certain parts of our town up north will be like, what? You're going south of Herndon, south of Shaw Center? And I'm like, what? Like, is it true you're going to see people who are like really poor and living in very disinvested neighborhoods? Yeah. Like, that's not a crime, and like these people love their kids. They love life too. But when that sets in, that tone of it isn't safe here, it isn't safe here, it is very hard to chase it out. Yeah. Fresno and Memphis are often cohorted in national community development circles. And I'm sorry to hear that people are saying those kinds of things.
I asked this question to every Uber driver I had while I was in Memphis. And like, is it dangerous here? They all were like, big eye roll. Like, I've lived here 15 years.
Because I know in Fresno, this was pre-Uber, but it was actually our cab drivers who the ones that were perpetuating it the most. Pick you up at the airport, drive you to a hotel, and the entire length of the drive tell you how awful the town is that you are now staying in. Now you have, you're in like so far 10 out of your 15 cities, I think. So
I know.
Now you're like kind of picking up a lot of
We only have 4 left. We're 11 out of 15. We have Springfield, Colorado Springs, Salt Lake City, and Vegas. I can't believe it. Only 4 left. All right, so we're going to talk about reclaiming traumatic spaces. I do want to share one amazing story from the road. We were in Memphis last night. As Rocky, who produced the 1946 movie, she gets a message today from a woman who said, I live with an extremely unaffirming husband. She said, I was absolutely stunned that I was able to talk him into going to see my presentation, 1946, the movie. She said, I was sure that at any moment he was going to get up and walk out. And she said, he didn't really say much after the film, but he was very kind to people walking out. And she was like, okay, what's going on here? And then this morning, they get up for breakfast and he tells her, we should pay for their housing in Colorado Springs.
Oh,
we should pay.
My gosh.
We should pay for their housing, and sure enough, they are they're sponsoring our housing in Colorado Springs.
And this was last night at the Memphis show, you said?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. Here's what I'm anxious to hear, and for others too as well. Are you feeling like, can you feel that sense of liberation, like in your own spirit and self as you're connecting with people and learning about their liberation?
I don't know if I would say that. Sometimes we're so into the details of like, oh, we got to
Yeah.
get up tomorrow, pack up and go, repack, unpack, crash, die, burn, and then go to the next place. I don't get to have a lot of introspection time, even as we're driving in the RV. It doesn't feel free to that. But I think when I have a chance to get home and really sit down and think about what's happened, I probably will break down and have a really good cry over all
I
the
hope
people
so.
that I've encountered.
I hope you are at least just like writing down notes so that you can look back and remember, even if you're not like having emotional connection with those words. If hopefully you're just like logging things that you need to go back and reflect on.
Oh, by the way, and we did go to a drag show in Birmingham that's been going on for like 11 years or something in Birmingham, and it was a hoot. I had a really good time, and you walk away from it, what is everybody pissed off about?
Yeah.
Like, it's fun. And actually, some of the performers were truly athletically gifted and amazing in what they did. But it was a really fun time.
I'm going to say this as if it's a shocking statement, and you're going to be like, yeah, no shit, Ashley. Do you know I have never been to a drag show?
I think it's only the second time I've ever been to a drag show too.
So our daughter like swears by RuPaul's Drag. What's the name of the TV show? RuPaul's Drag
Race, I think.
Drag Race. So okay, and she keeps telling me because she knows I kind of like reality TV. LOL.
So now I'm in Springfield.
Okay, so here you are.
So do you remember you grew up in Arkansas much of your young life. I grew up in southwestern Missouri. Do you remember driving on the 2-lane highways with just trees on every side of the road?
Well, yes, because we lived in the northwest corner of Arkansas, and every trip we took was like we would go to Tulsa because that was where my mom's family was. And it was just like this straight shot, like 2 hours to the west. And that is it was like a toll road, and that like just open land, very lush, tree line comes right up to the road oftentimes, but not always. And when you sent me the video today, I'm like, yeah, like every highway I ever drove on as a kid, that's what it looked like.
So we're driving through northern Arkansas. We got about halfway into Missouri and then cut up into Missouri. It reminded me of every trip we ever took to Silver Dollar City or to see the Passion Play down in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, where the Nazi guy built the big statue of Jesus. And I have to say, I started getting a little bit sick to my stomach. I haven't been back here in decades. And on that drive, I almost can't even enunciate, and I have DID. I think some of my parts were just like, oh my God, what are we doing? Why are we back here? And then we get to the Airbnb where we are, which is very nice. And it's a farmhouse. There's a barn and a shed and a tornado. I can't remember what the thing is called that you use as a tornado shelter. It just looks so much like my grandparents' house that we used to go to in Kansas. And I honestly, I'll just be vulnerable. I'm struggling with it all. My system is really struggling to be here. And part of the reason this is on our tour, I think, because Rocky, who sort of designed it all, was like, hey, let's go back to Springfield and reclaim it. I went to college here for a semester. I at a school called Evangel College, which is the Assemblies of God liberal arts college. I think there's like 4 Bible colleges in Springfield, and this is the headquarters of the Assemblies of God, the church I grew up in. And I got kicked out of Evangel which is not hard to do, because Evangel had like, you can't dance, you can't have long hair, you have to go to church on Sunday or you get in trouble. I mean, it was crazy. I got in trouble for getting a fraudulent eating pass in the dorm lunchroom. But then ultimately what sealed my fate was the dean of the school telling me, I'm not so concerned that you're a thief as that that your soul may be going to hell. And I turned to him and said, tell you what, why don't you go to hell? And that was it for me at Evangel. So I want to reclaim all of this, but so far I'm trying to feel the feels and the pain of course, there was also childhood household trauma in all of this. And so, yeah, it's been a little bit of a tough revisit to southwestern Missouri.
Yeah. And I know you're showing up after being on the road for 20 days. You're exhausted. I have been low key worried about what this experience might be like. And I know you're a little bit in and out there. So, yeah, it's a pretty poignant moment, I think, in the trip for your journey, both with 1946 and your personal journey. I am curious. This is a DID question for those of you listening at home who may not know what it is. We'll talk about that on another day. But when you reflect back on telling the dean to go to hell, do you know which part that was? That was like showing up and like, tell you what, asshole. I mean,
yeah, I think that would have to be my Johnny part. The Paul part, that's kind of the mostly front-facing part, would never be that disrespectful to authority. Another part, Johnny's our justice part that shows up when he feels like there's this massive injustice happening, and so I assume, and he can be pretty cutting. So I'm sure that was the part that showed up. I would love anybody, in the comments, say how have you reclaimed some spiritual space, because I'm trying to think of, and thank you for sending the love there, Sherry. I think kind of my strategy at this point is to talk about it with you and with you all that are listening in, and really feel the feels, feel what I'm feeling, and I've been kind of typing down all of the moments I'm remembering from childhood, from being here, and then I'll start to parse through what those memories mean to us, to our system in that. So that's kind of my strategy right now.
Yeah. Do you mind if I ask you a few more questions about this? And while I do, yeah, those of you who are joining us live and may have insight, or, when we say reclaiming traumatic spaces, that could be relational spaces. That could be physical places like Paul is experiencing right now with being in such a prominent community town that is headquarters to the denomination that was so impactful in Paul's life. I've got I think about reclaiming Christianity, reclaiming faith. Like, what does faith look like in a kind of post-evangelical, post-deconstruction world? But anyway, so be thinking about that. Send us your comments. All right. So you're there in Springfield, and you're remembering like a lot of other communities that you all were living in, and like that all just kind of remind you of Springfield. Is there something particularly, powerful or intense about the fact that the denomination is headquartered there? And are you planning to go visit the denominational headquarters?
I hadn't thought about it till just now. The headquarters are this big, tall blue building. We used to, and so, it was always called the Big Blue Building. And we used to make jokes about Springfield being the Mecca of the Assemblies of God, and you had to bow down in the direction of the Big Blue Building 3 times a day. I don't think I'll visit the denomination. I am thinking I will go visit the campus of the school. For those of you who don't know, the Assemblies of God is a particularly onerous fundamentalist religion. We never thought of ourselves as fundamentalists. We used to talk about those fundamentalists, but literally, I grew up, it has a huge emphasis on speaking in tongues. It has a huge emphasis on the rapture, that Jesus is going to come any moment. And you can backslide. You could lose your Christianity in a second. And if you lost your Christianity, the way I always described it was, if you were in a car and you saw an 18-wheeler about to T-bone you and you knew you were going to die and you said, oh, damn it, just before you got hit by the truck, you would get to the pearly gates and Peter would say, St. Peter would be there, and he would say, oh man, you almost made it to heaven, but you said darn, and so now you're going to hell for eternity. Bummer. And that is the religion I grew up in. And I think about the men like the dean that I encountered in it, including my own father, and how like just cruel this religion was to young people and traumatic. And yeah, just it does. It gives me that rock in the pit of my stomach that just makes me want to, in some ways, kind of lash out, just like Johnny saying, "You go to hell."
Yeah. It's interesting, as we have always like compared our experiences growing up, because I grew up in a pretty fundamentalist background, but the difference between the tradition I grew up in, Southern Baptist, which believed, if it's one thing I knew by age 3 or 4, I knew this, and that is that you could not lose your salvation. And then you grew up in oh, yes, you can. Everything else, besides speaking in tongues and not speaking in tongues, like almost everything else is the same between these two denominations, particularly in the region. We grew up in the same region of the country and in these denominations. But the difference that it, I think, makes and made for me, just that little bit of a hey, you can't lose your salvation. God's grace is that big. Like the difference of having that be like what filled my lungs with oxygen versus you could look the wrong way. You could do something and not even know it was a sin, and God will know, and then you're done. That is the most intense kind of performance orientation I can ever imagine. And all of that was being expressed through the institution of your spiritual authority and through the people of your personal authority.
And I was always taught, it's all about grace. It's all about grace, unmerited favor, all about grace. But then there was always this ... and you can't go to movies, and you can't dance, and don't have sex because it might make you want to dance together, and all of these crazy things, and hair length, rock and roll, you can't listen to rock. It was, the whole religion was about what you can't do. And the book of Romans, I know many people have problems with the writings that we attribute to Paul in the Bible, but I love the book of Romans. And it literally says the law is not the answer to sin. It is the causer of sin. Like, having rules brings all new ways to sin. And that's all I learned growing up is rules, and more rules. But it was all grace. So I wonder, like, in the Southern Baptist today, and you wouldn't be as familiar today, obviously, but like, what if, as is happening to so many people who are on a deconstruction journey or whatever, but they've said the prayer and joined the Baptist church, but then found out they were queer, or found out they were a Democrat. Can they still go to heaven? That's the question.
Well, there's hope for the queer person, but obviously not the Democrat.
Not the Democrat.
Let's be real. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a lot. And I appreciate Sherry's comment in the chat that think about something that is symbolic, whether it's taking a hot shower, as Sherry's suggesting, that's an interesting idea. Or like, I was thinking more like carve your initials in the building. I don't know.
I was thinking like find an empty space and like pee on the side of a building.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking like probably not nearly as elevated. Yeah, so that's a thought.
Yeah, I think I think it's going to be a matter of kind of doing parts inventory in here, finding out who's who's upset about it all, and
Yeah.
seeing what we can release,
Yep.
what have we
Not pee,
carried.
by the way. Release not pee.
Although Tori in the
Tori.
comments is who I met in Birmingham,
No way.
says yes, pee. So
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Lord. Yeah, I don't want to have to like get a bail bonds person for you in Springfield because you've defamed, a building of some sort. I don't think I'll know how to do that. But yeah, I was just thinking the very same thing when you said that. Is like, I think it's going to be really important for you to go inward and try to identify, maybe it is your Johnny part, but identify the places in you that had that shaming and condemning message from the dean. And like, it's not about the dean, right? It's not about the dean. It's about that part of you and those parts of you that now can have access to the love that you carry, and know that they don't have to carry that burden anymore.
Although we're still getting lots of votes in the comments here for the P, going P. Laura
Okay.
even says she'll send bail money.
Okay, well, as long as it's a team effort, then maybe we'll put you up to it. Peeing initials on the side of the building. I mean, there's anyway. All right. Well,
You're right, though. I think what reclaiming means to me is like pulling the parts of me back that are still attached there and saying, you don't get to hold this power over me anymore. And it's not forgiveness. I think sometimes we get hung up in like, oh, you have to forgive and forget. Father, forgive them. They didn't. I think that's really cruel to victims sometimes. But just being able to say, I take back my power. I don't need you to approve of me anymore. I approve of myself. And I think I'm thinking something along that lines. And maybe I even buy a little sage and burn it or something with me, and just reclaim my power and send the rest of that experience to hell. Not the people to hell, but the experience they caused, and send it to hell.
Yeah. You're getting a lot of love here in the chat. People nervous and excited for you, and just encouraging your bravery. Yeah. And gosh, I wonder if there's something about, when I think about the people, I don't know how far back it goes, but the people who founded Evangel, or the people who founded the Assemblies of God, I find that so much of these institutions, it's like there's always a kernel of like, what there was the glimpse or the kernel of some kind of expression of godly love, divine love, that just got manipulated, twisted, and distorted. It got politicized, and I mean that both in a electoral political way, but also in a just human political way, and it became corrupted. But almost like, I feel like, hey, but there is an eternal truth here of love, and that is in fact what you stand for, and that is in fact far more powerful than the harmful and just the harm that's been perpetuated, and just kind of like turning that on its head.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to think about that. I do know that as freshmen, we were required to take a class called Essential Christianity that made many, many parents very angry, because it did challenge us to look at gray areas. What are gray areas?
That's
And
interesting.
that may have been the first time I ever had somebody saying like, oh, we can wrestle over some of these passages. So that would probably be the one redeeming thing. And it led me to move to California, which has led to so many other things in my life. So it led me to, I was thinking about it, because when I moved to California, I was using bad weather as an excuse to go out. But now maybe it was actually, I was running from this place that I have felt really passionate hatred towards for a long time. Felt badly that I felt that way, but now realizing that it was, trauma I was carrying that I wasn't even in touch with, that made me hate it. And so giving my parts to permission to feel that hatred, but start to say, okay, how do we not let it have that negative power over us?
One more Evangel College thread I want to pull here, and then I want to pivot and talk a little bit about the way I'm thinking of reclaiming the faith space in my journey. Isn't it true that Lisa Welchel, who played Blair on Facts of Life, went to Evangel College the same time you did?
I met Lisa Welchel at Evangel College. That is correct.
And years later, she was on Survivor.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, and Tootie from Facts of Life, who I think, Tootie was on Real Housewives Atlanta. Like, was it Atlanta or Potomac? Real Housewives of Atlanta years ago. So, these legacies, these Gen X actresses.
One other brush with celebrity story of Springfield, Missouri is I had a cousin that went to high school with Brad Pitt.
Oh my God, that lives in my mind.
Kickapoo High School, but Brad Pitt people kind of don't like Brad Pitt here anymore because he won't claim Springfield as his home anymore.
I got it. I mean, Cher doesn't claim Fresno, so the bitterness is real. I get it.
Yeah.
So, thinking about reclaiming faith or reclaiming spiritual connection, I don't know that I am. I don't know that I'm quite ready to say I'm feeling kind of this breakthrough, but I think I'm coming up on a spiritual breakthrough. So I don't want to jinx it by like putting words on it too quickly. But I think I'm just about to the point where I feel sort of free of the sort of the religious expectations, oppression. And, even though I grew up in a similar environment where everyone would say it's not a religion and it's not performance based, but also it entirely was. And that created a lot of shame. Like I could never really access God unless I kind of went through my own version of what it like, well, I gotta read the Bible. I gotta do it this way. There was always this feeling of like, you have to be perfect to approach God, even though everyone said that you didn't have to. So I'm kind of like feeling like letting enough go of that. And then, Tori's right in the chat. She's saying we practice that line all the time. It's not a religion, it's a relationship. And yet, anyway, so
here's the rules of the relationship.
That's right. And the expectations, and you have to look a certain way. You have to think a certain way, and you have to, you have to have an agenda with people around you that if they don't profess Christ, it is your job. It is your job to invite. It is your job to sell Jesus. It is your job to sell salvation. And then I was always like, I don't really want to do that. So then I felt guilty for not. Yeah. Anyway, I'm kind of close.
If you don't do relationship just right, God will turn his back on you just like he did on his son on the cross. Yeah.
So I kind of went from, and this for me has been now probably about a 4-year journey, but I kind of went from, all right, shut it all down. Like shut it down to then, and I'll like a lot of the mental health work that I've done in large part, my own just personal journey and learning about internal family systems and all this kind of stuff, that has been a huge, huge, huge aid for me to kind of stay connected to a God space when I was like in this mode of like, I don't want to have anything to do with the institution of church. But anyway, so mental health professionals have been so instrumental here. And then I kind of went to this space of like, I know there is divine love. I know now, like physicists are starting to identify like we can like energy and the thing that connects us all, the antimatter. I'm like, okay, there's definitely like a spiritual thing out there, but I can't imagine it being personally connected with me. But I'm kind of coming up to a point where I'm like maybe revisiting that a little bit. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like. If it's clear, it's like the stepping stones for me have been that like really becoming aware of how toxic and oppressive my faith practice was, even though I didn't think that it was. B, kind of like being aware of divinity and maintaining belief in that, but it's like you're kind of on your own in life to now like, well, maybe there is some kind of personal interaction with divinity. So that's where I'm at right now.
I think that's so good, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's important for us to realize if somebody has a spouse that says, I'm going to treat you really well as long as you interrelate with me exactly as I demand you interrelate with me. And when you don't, not only am I willing to turn my back on you, but I may at some point set you on fire. That is not a healthy relationship. That is coercion. That is manipulation. That is narcissism, which is sometimes an overused word in this day. But that is the God we're taught, right? That you can't pray right now in need because you haven't read the Bible enough, or you haven't spent enough time in prayer, or this, that, or the other thing. And being released from the consequences of not living up to the expectation of dressing right, being right, reading enough Bible, believing the right way, going to the right church, going enough times to the right church, volunteering enough at the right church, all of those things that make us ashamed of ourselves. When we throw that away, and I believe, see the message that Jesus was saying, I'm not inviting you into a religion and a church. I'm inviting you to get reconnected to a divine goodness and love and wisdom that is bigger than you, but is very accessible to you to bring from heaven down to earth. Then you won't need rules anymore, because the relationship with other human beings is going to matter so much. And so I do think when we get the shame and the rules and this thin-skinned version of God out of the way, then a reclaiming of faith is available to us.
And I feel like I'm going to be very interested to start reading the Bible again through that lens. And I'm kind of like, I wonder what that's going to be like. We're going to need to probably move on to our last couple segments here, but I want to just make a final point here. Tori, or call Tori's comment out. So many loving and encouraging words. Tori says, I hope this is freeing for you, Paul. And I would just say, peeing is freeing. Springfield, Missouri. Peeing is freeing.
I do want to add to the conversation, ultimately, like, I think the trauma that happened in my life, in my childhood household, childhood religion, didn't happen in spite of us being a Christian household. It happened because we were a Christian household in a particular, and I'm not saying all of Christianity does that, but I'm saying a Christianity that says, be good for God. You know, my parents certainly weren't allowed to seek therapeutic help from a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And so you have all the repression and shame and all those things. And so this stuff comes out in really unhealthy ways. And I just want to say to everyone, Jesus' actual, mantra and mission statement was set captives free. And so if it takes peeing on a wall to set you free, try not to get arrested doing it, but set yourself free from the shame and bondage of the principality of American Christianity, because I don't think it's Christian at all. It doesn't look anything like the Christ I read about in the Bible.
And what you just said is such a profound point that it probably is worth noting and saying, you know what, let's dive deeper into that for like a whole hour sometime. I think most sort of pedestrian evangelical Christian, American folk just sort of like doing the thing. It's what they were born into. They don't have any malice in their heart, but they're like, why are we like going so hard against this institution of the church? And like, certainly your inbox is full of people who express a lot of intense anger at the things that you say towards the church. And if what you just said is true, that the church itself, the way this is being carried out, the way that the expression of Christ in the manner that we're seeing today with the religious political stuff going on is the cause of the abuse, that it's because of that. That's a really intense and big statement to say.
The cultural issue of pastors molesting parishioners and children is a systemic issue. It's not like,
Yes.
oh, that's just a bad person there, and that's a bad person there, and that's a bad person there. We got a lot of bad people in pastoral leadership in Christianity. And I don't think it's just one-offs of bad people. I think there is a systemic issue in American Christianity that makes this stuff become the outlet of the frustration, of the shame of original sin theology that I think is bad theology. And then the desire to cover it up in the church, to save the good work of what we do is horrific and has created this systemic issue. And so it does have to be radically changed. And I think that's important. And so to go into the political side of this, and I think part of the blessing of Donald Trump is he has allowed the really dark heart of American Christianity to be exposed in this season.
And I mean, this is like this is what I'm saying is I think most Protestants, and particularly, evangelical right, political right folks, I think they're really clear that there is systemic abuse in the liturgical or the Catholic Church, but to stop and be like, well, hold on. Maybe it's in our wing of Christendom as well. That is certainly not something that is talked about or understood in the narrative of the political right-wing church, evangelical church. So that's kind of a big deal. And I just wonder if others would see. I mean, you certainly hear enough examples of leaders, people in leadership, in this wing of the church that are doing the same kind of stuff. So
Mike Bickle of IHOP Kansas City, not International House of Pancakes, but International House of Prayer, is somebody we know of well. We didn't know personally, but we know of well in our line of Christendom. I think it's something like 19 women now have accused him. We're hearing even more horrific stories of how prophetic gifts were used to manipulate women into inappropriate, intimate relationships. And not enough Christians are horrified that the name of their religion is being put to it.
That's a good way. That's a very good way to put it. Not enough people are horrified.
Yeah.
And so then you have to stop and ask, so why aren't we horrified? Because we think it's not true, it's not real, or it's like, we're like, it's probably true, but we're just kind of sweep it away.
Yeah. I hear our little dog.
I know. Okay. We've had this whole journey while Paul's been on the road, the family dog and I, we are like getting into relational space. I had no idea how needy this dog is. And now it's just me and him. And every night we had to play, we had to go for a walk, all this kind of stuff. So I'm going to need to go, but we should land on an inspirational note and just reflect on what are you thinking, Paul? What's inspiring you this week? And I'll share something on my end too.
I want to say two things really quickly that have inspired me. One is all but one of the churches that we've been to so far, 11 stops, have had a female senior leader of the church. And I love it. I love it so much. Yes, snap to that. I have just found that to be so inspiring. And I know you like the song, Put a Woman in Charge. And we'll have to play that for the people sometime. But I have loved meeting these women. And speaking of inspiring women, Michelle Obama blew it out of the park last night. I mean, Barack was right when he said, I'm the dumbest man in the world to be willing to follow Michelle Obama on a speaking stage. I just thought what she did was so amazing at just being, speaking like a normal person, saying, this is what normal Americans are. And Donald Trump is nothing like a normal American and doesn't want to bring a normal America to us. And she spoke of grieving for her mother the last time she was in Chicago before last night. And she tied that into, and many of us have been grieving for our country because we feel like the dreams of what this liberal democracy can be are over because of Trump, and that half of the country is divided behind this wanting to go back to a time when, and she didn't say this, my words, when white men controlled the world, and to tie that in, and just how beautifully she told the story of, but now we're starting to believe that it doesn't have to be this way, that we can repudiate this right-wing darkness that just talks so horribly about America and about us as a people, and say, fuck no, that's not us. That's not us.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to tee off of that. What's inspiring to me over the last few weeks, actually, and then there was something last night that is just the weirdest thing that inspired me that I'll talk for a second about. But I think when you are in this sort of evangelical world, one of the big ahas for me in my deconstruction journey is the extent to which I carried an agenda all the time. And once that started crumbling, I did not realize the extent to which the agenda was between me and whoever was in front of me or around me. So if you were a colleague at work, if you were a close friend, if you were, whatever, like there's a subtle thing you're always thinking about that is like, okay, I'm being nice to you. I'm being cool to you. I'm being connected with you, except for I'm not really, because I know that our eternal stories are different and you don't exactly believe the way I do. And so there is this very subtle, it's like cigarette smoke in a casino. It's just there all the time. And so for me, like the deconstructing thing and just being like, oh my God, God and love are in me. God and love are in every single person. So my experience with other people, from strangers at the grocery store to family members who I've never really embraced because I always felt this distance, that is all falling away. And now I just get to love and connect with other human beings who carry that same loving spirit in them. So then take all of that and imagine this, millions of people who are being excited about a different future for our country, and that maybe there's a chance that we can continue to pursue this, the more perfect union. Now think of the DNC convention. Now think of, President Obama's and Michelle Obama's speech last night. What they are expressing is every bit as much an expression of divine love and connection as you would hear from the finest pulpit in any church on a Sunday. It's the same spirit. And we used to live of like, yeah, we're in it, not of it. But now we get to be in it, and we get to be connected with other people who have ambitions for their families just like we do. So I'm finding this whole sort of political season to be very, very inspirational. And in the past, I would have been like, on the outside looking in, passing judgment on stuff. So that's big I inspiration, lowercase I inspiration for me. Check this out. You know how sometimes like just a random song hits you and you're like, I got to listen to that. And you're just absolutely bawling your eyes out and you don't know why. I'm talking like, Paul, I know this is you. I know the songs that you're like, I had a revival last night listening to this song or that. And it's always some random whatever. My song last night was from Les Mis, Bring Him Home. Bring Him Home. Now, any of you like musical theater, like opera, or anything like that, or even if you haven't ever listened to this song, go listen to it. Pick any version of the song on YouTube and hear the heart of this song. It is this person who is praying to God, saying, basically, my adopted daughter loves this man so much who has gone off to war. He's young. I'll give my life for his. Let him live. Bring him home. Look, I'm crying even thinking about it. And that wrecked me last night. I must have listened to it 5 times. So that sort of heart for sacrificial love for other people, for imagining our people who are gathered in Chicago right now are like imagine that spirit of, we want to do right by people who aren't alive. We want to do right by people who are coming up after us. That's pretty damn divine in my view.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. And Tori says in the comments to give you a podium. Definitely, my spouse can spin a speech. I tell you, I listened to 8 of your State of the City speeches, and you wanted to run through a wall for good when you were done hearing it. So yes, give her a podium.
Well, okay, and I'm not just trying to flatter you, but also I felt that way pretty much every Sunday that you preached. So,
Mutual Admiration
yeah.
Society.
Yeah.
And so Michelle's speech was amazing last night, but her hair, did you see her hair? It was on fire. You got to see the hair.
It
Michelle
was, I
Obama's
mean,
hair.
and like how curated anytime somebody like, I mean, like there are few people in the entire world or the history of humanity that are as well known and significant as Barack and Michelle Obama. You know how well curated they are. So I would love to have been a fly on the wall in the ponytail planning meeting.
Yeah. I mean, that has to be an extension, right? I don't think her hair
Yeah. No, but it's like, I mean, just imagine the dialogue, like, well, we could do the bob, we could do the this. No, let's do the super long pony. Like, whatever that, like the fashion experts of the world, like getting involved to figure out how to style her. I mean, that's what I imagine. Maybe she was like, nah, cool, I'm just doing that. Maybe it was nothing like that, but I don't know. I'm curious what the backstory is.
And one other note from the DNC is I thought Ashley Biden's speech about her dad was just absolutely beautiful. I loved it. That was one of my favorite moments. So I just think there is, and I hope it continues. And Michelle Obama and Barack Obama both last night, made the point of like, hey, we're having fun now, but it's going to get tough. And we're going to have to keep fighting and going.
That was so wise for them to point that out, that it's like, well, and I'll say it this way. I once heard a person use this example of like a fighter pilot being interviewed on the news, and the fighter pilot was asked by the reporter, like, isn't it scary? Like, start drawing fire and like, whatever. And the pilot says, no, it's not scary. That's how you're over the target, is when you draw fire. So
yeah, and I love the idea of, and I think it was Michelle that said it last night, that we need, what would be great is if we have a complete repudiation of Trumpism in this election, that it's not just a tiny victory, but a huge victory.
Yes.
So that maybe some people on the right can come out of the haze that they're in and say, oh, wait, we don't have to bow down to this horrible person and horrible vision anymore, and save us from it. That would be beautiful.
This is me acting out Tori's emoji of the like green vomit coming out of someone's mouth. This is like we've got to purge America. We got to do this. Bleh. So all right, well, we should put a pin in it next week. I'm excited because our plan is it's going to be your last-ish on the road this summer. And so we're going to like dedicate time to you going through your Christian nationalism presentation that you've been doing. At that point, it will be 14 of 15 cities probably, or 12.
Right.
So definitely plan on tuning in, downloading next week's episode. And please, please, please do us this favor. If you're listening right now, share this episode with one person, maybe somebody that you want to feel loved or encouraged today, or maybe somebody that you want to be really challenged and irritated today. Share this episode. Make sure and talk about us to all your friends, because your support makes a big difference. You can also subscribe to Ish. You can go to evangelicalish.com. You can subscribe. It costs you nothing. It just means you get emails from Paul that have some typos in them. And I'm not going to apologize. I don't like a typo. This is honestly, if we haven't gotten divorced over typos after 30 years, then maybe nothing can separate us. I don't know. Anyway, you're going to get some communication. You're going to know what's going on in our world. And that's all it takes if you subscribe. But would also be super great if you signed up for a little subscription every month, a support every month. And that's like $4.99 and makes a big difference for us as we $5.99. Sorry, I'm not pitching well tonight. But consider it. It's just a little tiny bit, but a little bit goes a long way in us being able to just do what we're doing here every week. So,
and make sure to follow my TikTok and Instagram. I'm thinking now, I'm not going to pee on the wall at the college. So whoever is listening from the government, I'm not going to do that. But maybe I'll, if I do something and it's significant, maybe I may even live stream from there. And so make sure you're plugged in so you know it's coming. Well, this was
All
fun.
right.
Thank you all for letting me vulnerably share, and for all the encouragement and love that, yeah, I feel better having kind of had this conversation. So thank you
Good.
all.
Well, be sure to keep us updated tomorrow as you are traveling about town, and everyone can check that out on your various social media channels. And we will look forward to seeing everybody next week on Ish.